Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru. Welcome to the next episode of our podcast, where we go through the autobiography of a yogi line by line. We are in chapter 3, and we started chapter 3 last time. I wasn't there, but I watched the episode. The guys did a great job, and now I'm back, and we're going to do the second part of chapter 3. And we are talking. Wait, let me first ask you guys how you guys are doing. How is everyone feeling? Feeling the vibes? Everyone, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very joyful. Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
I'm feeling 2 vibes.
I see.
Yes. Bilocational vibes. One in LA and one in here.
Yeah.
Where you are, Mike.
Nice. Yeah, we are in many locations. That's true. And there's a lot of dualities in this episode. There's like a saint with 2 bodies, and then there's 2 different kinds of pensions. So it's a masterful segue, I would say, into the first thing we're going to talk about. Let me just summarize a little bit what we're going to talk about today. So we have Yogananda. He went to Benares or Varanasi, if I'm not mistaken, to visit one of his father's friends. His name is Swami Pranabananda, and he will figure out that there's something special about Pranabananda. This guy, he has some special abilities. The chapter is called The Saint with 2 Bodies, so it's a bit of a spoiler. We know kind of what his special ability is, but we will see how he finds out what is going on, and it's actually a very, very interesting and very funny story, I would say. And the first thing that comes out when they have their conversation is that Pranabananda says he's very thankful to Yogananda's dad Bhagavati, because he recommended him for a pension at the railway company. They both worked at Bengal Nagpur Railway, and so he is retired now, and he's getting a pension from Bengal Nagpur Railway. But then he talks about his second pension, the pension from the Heavenly Father, the pension of fathomless peace, as he calls it. And I found that very interesting, and so does Mukunda. Mukunda sits there and he goes like, "What is that other pension? Does God like throw money at you or something?" But that's not at all the case. He just has mastered a state where he feels inner peace and where he doesn't have any more desires in this life. And that kind of feels to him like at least worth as much as the railway pension, because he is kind of completely content, and he presumably has direct contact with God, which is something that most of the spiritual seekers are looking for as well. Chris?
Imagine you're Mukunda's age. You heard this as a youngster. Like, this is a nugget of wisdom that is so valuable, really. Like, if every youngster could hear something like this kind of a teaching, imagine where we would be, really. If you're learning this at a young age, you're hearing this for the first time, as we're going to go into, young Mukunda is asking him quite, with a lot of curiosity, what do you mean by this? His mind's really expanding, his consciousness is locking on to this. So he's taking this lesson and this learning from this saintly man. Imagine if the world could know about this from a young age, and where you might set your priorities in life. Do you really want to chase wealth in a career all your life for one pension, when actually there's 2 options of having a pension in life? It's just I just thought to myself, I could have done with hearing this myself when I was a kid.
How old would you have liked to have heard it, Chris?
Oh, I don't know. How old would you be able to comprehend it? Like 5, 6? I remember my dad actually telling me when I was studying, I think it was GCSEs, maybe a bit younger. It was maybe about 13, 14. And he said to me, Chris, it doesn't matter whether you're a successful businessman or a bus driver or something. as long as you're happy in life, as long as you have happiness in life, that's really what you should be aiming for. And that stuck with me. I remember exactly where I was at the time. We were standing in the kitchen. It was like it was yesterday. So these little lessons in life go a long way. So yeah, very privileged, obviously, for Yogananda to have heard this at a young age, but even younger perhaps is the answer.
So we need to have it at the youngest possible age, but in a language or a way that can be appreciated by that aged child.
It's a very visceral lesson that Yogananda has here, and he's sharing it with us. So if you could have it in this way, exceptional. But any other way, I'm sure would do as well.
It's interesting though, because you say that about the age, but I do genuinely feel that you have to be at a point where you're receptive to truth. And you might be super young, and obviously it would be amazing to have that at a young age. But even as an adult, how many times do we have to learn a lesson for it to actually sink in? So it could be that we have these lovely nuggets of truth and knowledge come to us from, birth, but they may not sink in. Who knows? But it would be very lovely, wouldn't it?
I think part of that, getting that second pension, is also that you have to work hard in your first pension. So, for example, Kedarnath Babu's, Swami Pranavananda says that he says, I conscientiously finished my earthly duties in life. So imagine if he had just lived his life in a non-responsible way, just, dilly-dathering and not really like doing the work that was in front of him. You can imagine that's going against the grain of our purpose in life. So we may be like, we may be positioned in a job we don't like, but doesn't mean that we don't do our best in it. And equally, if you're privileged or blessed enough to be in a job that you do like, or to have a job that you love, and then it's not enough just to like do the minimum that's required for that job. You've got to conscientiously do the best that you can, like give it your all. And I think in that process, then you actually burn more of your karma, and you grow even more, and then you can be eligible for this great and even better second pension that may not be financially rewarding, but spiritually it will be the creme de la creme.
I agree. Some really good points. Like what you just said, Priyank, I think this is like one of the keys on the spiritual path, that kind of enthusiasm that you need, right? Go the extra mile all the time, keep on keeping on, even if things don't work out the way you want, then you put even more effort in, to get where you want. And Lauren's point was very interesting about being receptive, being able to be receptive, and then also Chris mentioned the age, right? So I think Mukunda asked very innocent questions here, and that's very understandable because he's quite young. But then also he does understand the answers, right? He's not, that means something to him and it fascinates him. And I can testament from my life that I had two spiritual parents, and when I was young, they gave me a lot of spiritual wisdom that I had a hard time to comprehend, because I still found that I was when you're young, you're still figuring out how the world works, and it's fascinating, right? And that took priority when I was young, and only later on did I figure out how to shift my life more towards spirituality. But Mukunda, I don't know how old exactly he is at this point, but he understands, and that makes a lot of sense to him already.
Well, I think we not calculate 12? I can't remember, but he was young. I also think that that his response of surprise, and questioning what does it mean, I think that was a lila, in the sense that if you read Majda, and even if the previous chapter is a testament that he's from a very young age, he's already very well spiritually connected to his path and to God and gurus. So he should theoretically straight away know what he's talking about. Heavenly, the recommendations of the Heavenly Father and unfathomable peace, because he's already been meditating at a young age, and he's already been communing with Divine Mother at a young age. But when you're with a spiritual master, you also want to hear the words rather than interpret them as you would. Like he could have just said, oh yeah, that's true, but he actually asked, what does that mean? And then he got this more nuggets, a pension of fathomless peace, the reward of many deep years of meditation. And he says, I never crave money, and God provides every single thing that I need. So he got all these 6 or 7 extra nuggets out of him just by pretending to be confused or being inquisitive. And so that's one sign that he's kind of playing a little bit of a game with his questioning and his interaction. The other hint is later on, when Swami Pranabananda explains his bilocation, the miracle. He asks him why, he's almost asked him in a surprised way, why are you baffled by this? And Swami Pranabananda knows that he's not baffled by this, but he's playing this game so he can draw out this conversation and this intrigue, so it would read beautifully as it does in the autobiography and capture the hearts and imaginations of all of us devotees for generations. Well, Lauren?
Oh, I was pondering very deeply on this.
Sorry.
It's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because really, we'll never really know, right? I mean, you might be well on the money, Priyank, who knows? Oh, not in this case. But something that I was looking at is, and something that struck me a lot in this part of the chapter, is that we actually get an insight into his emotional world at that time. He talks a lot about his feelings in this bit, which is interesting to me because, obviously we'll delve into it more later, but, he talks about how he finds it obscure. And then later on, he says that he feels abashed, which is a strong feeling for someone that if you did know what was happening and you were just, playing along, would you really feel that way? Or was it that he got, he was a human and capable of feeling the same human emotions that we do? And I'm sure at some points in his journey, he got caught up in Maya and wasn't, at one all the time, which I find very inspiring, personally. But yeah, I think it's easy to put our guru so highly, but we have to remember that he was a child as well, just, in a different sort of way. But anyway, that's my little 2-piece on it. What do you reckon, Mike?
I found this interesting because it works super well for the spiritually inclined but not spiritually experienced reader, because he would probably ask the same question. It was like, oh, a second pension? The first thing, when you hear pension, you think money, you don't think anything else, right? So that was just my take. Priyank?
Yeah, no, I agree. That was exactly pretty much what I was going to say, Mike. So Lauren, you in your little view of it there, you said you find it so inspiring that these very human, elements of surprise and all, obscurity and a bit, feeling abashed. But as a reader of the autobiography, he's kind of putting the reader who may not be spiritually inclined in that room. So imagine you don't believe in any of this and you've never heard of any of this, then you'd find this remark obscure. So he's kind of, I think he's playing to the mass reader by putting them in that scene, and you're reading it as through the eyes of Mukunda, but you don't know what's behind Mukunda's eyes, obviously, because you're only seeing and hearing and reading what was said in the room.
We're all nodding our heads in agreement. For those that can't see, we're all nodding. Like the Churchill dog we talked about last week.
Do you know about the Churchill dog?
I don't. I'm not English enough for that. Lived there 8 years, never heard of the Churchill dog.
Listen back to our last podcast, you can hear all about it.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that means you got caught out. That means you haven't yet heard our podcast.
I listened to some of it. I didn't listen to the whole thing.
Backtracking. Just typical Boris Johnson, Donald Trump.
Question me in Parliament. Yeah.
Now people know exactly when we're recording this. They're following politics.
In England, this kind of stuff keeps going on for years, anyways. Yeah. So what does that actually mean to have this pension of fathomless peace? We found a little section from the Bhagavad Gita, which we could read out. Chris, would you be able to read that part? Because it explains pretty nicely how a devotee feels when he has obtained this pension.
Yeah, the self-realized yogi is a prince of peace sitting on a throne of poise, directing his kingdom of activity, wholly devoted to God in heart and mind, sacrificing to him the fruits of all his actions. That devotee, saith the Lord, having obtained me and remaining continually united to me, shall truly be mine own.
I really like that. Can we all agree amongst us and listeners, the next time there's a conversation about pensions, we then roll the conversation very subtly but very directly as well on are you working, what about your second pension, how's that going, are you saving for that, and then have that dialogue. Should we make that a pledge? Let's make this a movement, a second pension that everyone works for.
Yeah, and your daily meditations or like your daily deposits. And if you put in 25%,
yeah.
Yeah, do the math, Chris. Yeah, do the math.
25.
Wow, you have to put 25, your employees putting 75%, 3 times.
It's a good deal. Yeah,
it's a great deal. Yeah,
God is paying
and then,
3 times your effort.
God matches the whole thing. The
No,
guru
3
matches your
times.
effort, and then God matches it again. You get double matched.
Triple locked pensions.
and I think Guruji talks about it as well. If you can delay receiving of good karma in some way, it actually multiplies. No, I don't know. I'll be interested if any of the listeners know a little bit about that, but it's in the back of my mind somewhere about karma and how it might work. So interesting idea. I just want to comment actually on the Prince of Peace sitting on a throne of poise. This was a mantra that I used early on when I was on the path of SRF. I think living in London, especially, this was of value to me because, you're fighting to get to work every morning and returning from work in throngs of crowds. And this mantra actually really helped me at the time. I remember repeating it over and over and over again. So, I'm a Prince of Peace sitting on a throne of poise, calmly directing the kingdom of my activity. So that was something that I used. So it's a really great find there, Mike.
Affirmation you were using, the affirmation techniques. Nice.
I can see Chris sitting on the Piccadilly line saying he's a Prince. That's so funny.
Yeah.
Sitting on your narrow boat, slowly
Wider.
streaming down. Oh, wider. slowly floating along.
Yeah. There was only part of peace in London I think you could find was on the
Yeah. Now I can relate, and I think that's what life often does to us. And then it's like a test. If we can, outward circumstances are not promoting our inner peace, and we still keep it. I think that's where our second pension can help us a lot. Lauren?
Definitely. And also he says here that his pension of fathomless peace was a reward for many years of deep meditation, which is just amazing, really, isn't it? It's definitely a sprinkle of inspiration for all of us. I feel that, if you, like you said, keep on keeping on, maybe, just maybe, not that you're doing it for the fruits of the actions, but maybe, just maybe, you'll get that second pension.
I like that, Lauren, because his first pension, the monetary one, was due to his conscientious attitude to work. And the second and more important pension was because of his conscientious, deep, soulful meditation in cosmic consciousness.
And, it's something that's often talked about on the SOF path, to meditate deeply. They don't just say meditate, but it's deep meditation. So, yeah, that's another little lesson in there for us.
They don't say transcendental meditation either.
There's this concept that often comes up that Guruji mentions that I just thought of, is that make your everyday's meditation a little bit deeper than the day before.
Yeah.
Which it's not easy if you think about it, right? So first of all, you have to think about, how was my meditation yesterday? Do I even remember? And how do I make it go slightly deeper? And it is a great concept, because it actually, I feel like it helps you. It's just something to trick the mind to actually go deep. And that I feel like that those are the little tricks that you need to actually go deep in meditation, just so you don't have to go through this long period of, oh yeah, come on, calm down, but that you start meditating and you get there instantly.
Yeah. I feel like it's one of those things that, if I'm totally honest, I've just resigned to not winning that, not fulfilling that objective, but this comes back to, like, Guruji says, even if you take 1% of what I have taught you, you'll get to God. And this is this small one. This is exactly what he's talking about, isn't it? If you make that your goal, tomorrow's meditation is deeper than today's, and don't get up until that's the case, then dare I say, how many days would it take? I think it'd be in days before you reach that divine goal, as opposed to years, decades, or lifetimes.
Yeah, go, Chris.
The longer it would take would mean that the deeper your meditation was the day before, so then actually you would reach it quicker. Would that be the logic?
Say that. No, I didn't understand that. Say that, or explain that again.
If you were sitting there for, in theory, a long time, to go deeper than you did the day before, that means you actually did go quite deep. If you're able to go a little bit deeper, that would mean that you've already gone relatively deeply the day before. Given that you're able to go deep at all, that, if you were going for a long time, you'd actually be quite far down the road getting your ultimate pension. So it'd be worse if you're able to do it quite quickly every day, because that means you're probably not deep, deeply at all. You're only going the minimum every day.
Ideally you want to do it in the minimum amount of time. But in my case, it takes me ages, and I can just, if I'm really gonna try that technique, I can imagine some days it would take me 5 minutes, other days it would be like 2 hours before I get to the state I was in yesterday.
The whole day.
But then if it rolls into the next day, then you're really finished. Am I really following Guruji's technique?
I can relate, Priyank, and I feel like one thing that makes it really difficult is that I feel like I'm not always in control of how deep my meditation is. I can do all the right things, and sometimes it just works beautifully, and sometimes it's difficult to get my mind under control. And I feel like that's why this is not the easiest thing to practice, I would say.
I think you just pretty much there, just in a nutshell, captured why we give up on this. It's not in my control. But Guruji doesn't say that, does he? He doesn't say it's in your control. He literally says the ball's in your court, guy, buddy. But that is pretty much like, I
do believe he doesn't say do it. He does say try it. Try to go deeper every day.
If you make the resolve, if I remember.
Make the resolve. So I interpret that as make the effort, try it. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. So I guess we can work towards this, and maybe it will work one day. that's always.
Should we try it for the next 7 days of this podcast? So we'll record next time.
It's like, okay, yeah, let's do it.
Let's report back.
Report back. How did that go? Like, yeah. Also, one thing, it's like really hard to measure how deep your meditation is. I sometimes have a meditation where I feel like, oh, I'm meditating right now and it feels so great. But then sometimes I meditate and it feels like normal, but then I walk away from it and afterwards I feel like, oh my God. So it has different, yeah, I don't think there's a unit of measurement for it, and like it's just more like a feeling in the end that you have, right? So as an engineer, it's very unsatisfying. This whole situation.
I recall a funny instance where in the London Centre early on when I was starting out going to do meditations, I must have been very, very tired, and I came out of a London Centre meditation thinking, oh wow, that was amazing. And then as I went on, I thought, wait a minute, did I fall asleep? Was I may have fallen asleep at some point because I felt rested. It played in my mind for a while. I might figure out whether or not I'd actually gone deep into meditation and been sort of transcended somewhere else, or just fell asleep for 10 minutes.
Mike, the engineer's hack to what our next 7 days objectives is you'd hope. Let's hope that all of us did not have a great meditation today. So we're starting off from like a very low bar. So just it's as soon as you achieve just one like iota better, then just stop meditating. Then you've achieved. You can achieve the goal.
and you don't want to achieve it in one day, right? You want to achieve it gradually. Don't go too deep today, because otherwise tomorrow will be difficult.
We'll just not show up to the podcast next week.
I don't think we're promoting the right lessons here.
Definitely not.
Okay, let's move on. That's one thing that I found really interesting is that Pranabananda and Bhagavati met at Bengal Nagpur Railway, and also the way Bhagavati found Lahiri Mahasaya was through a colleague who he worked with, Abhinash Babu, who wanted to take leave to go to see Lahiri Mahasaya, and that's how Bhagavati ended up meeting him. So it's at least 3 pretty advanced disciples of Lahiri Mahasaya working at this company. We make anything of this, Priyank?
I do make a lot of it actually, because I thought of it as you know, in your comments you put, was it a very blessed company? But I thought it may be a very blessed industry sector or profession. So when I was,
because you work in it too, yeah.
That's exactly it. So when I before I graduated, I read the autobiography like maybe 2 years before I graduated, and I was picking a profession, and I applied to virtually every industry sector, and I was quite fortunate. I could choose where I wanted to go, and this was in the back of my mind. What is the most noble? What is the most noble? The least capitalistic, selfish, type thing that I could do, and that was the path that was the winner. And it also helped that in looking for signs, like when I was interviewing for this network, this job with the railway, for the graduate job, would you believe the interviewer was a reverend?
Wow. Okay. So
So
there was always some
minister,
spirituality involved.
and he was and so I went to many interviews, and this was the first time, I think probably the only time in my career I've ever been interviewed by a clergyman who also works in the industry.
Yeah, this is in general an interesting question. When you start working for a company, do you ever feel like, what kind of karma is this company producing? And am I compatible with this? Do I want to be part of this? And I worked in different sectors, and it's a really hard thing to answer. And it's comforting, I guess, if you work in the railway industry, to know that Yogananda's father worked in the railways. I think his brother Ananta as well, eventually, right? And then if Yogananda wouldn't have joined the ashram of Sri Yukteswar, he might have ended up there as well. So it seems to be an industry that where kind of you don't, like, if you are a saintly person, you don't feel repelled by it, at least. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it's kind of a direct service, isn't it? Like a lot of professions, you don't see the output, whereas this is like you kind of see it, and you can own the responsibility for it very directly.
On the other hand, you could say Yogananda's father started a bank, but he wanted no shares of it. What does that mean?
Amazing. We did discuss that, yeah.
We did, yeah. Chris?
Yogananda is in the transport business, right? So he's saying that is the airplane mode. So he went one step further, didn't he? And then
he's a swan. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful thought. Yeah, he picks you up and delivers you to the shores of God, right? Amazing. I really like that metaphor, Chris. Let's move on to the next thing. I was so it goes on. They still sit in the living room of Pranabananda. Yogananda describes it a bit. He says there's like not many furniture there. It's not very there's not many things there in general. He sees his wooden sandals. They become, we'll talk about them later. And he also doesn't talk much. He sits there and seems to be either in deep meditation or otherwise busy. And there's a word for me, English is my second language. So, but I never heard the word. You say pauciloquy? Is that how you say it? And what it means is being economical with your words. That means you don't really say much. And we know that Pranabananda is the saint with two bodies. So might the reason be that he doesn't say much is that his attention is right now maybe on his other body, that he might be talking to someone else at the time, walking somewhere else. Is that maybe why that is, Chris?
I would interpret it by saying a lot with little.
Mm-hmm.
So he was able to convey a lot with saying very little to Yogananda. So, he was able to kind of give Yogananda a lot of information, convey it, even to the point of saying, why are you surprised? Like you should already get this to some degree. So he was maybe conveying through the experience, which is what we're trying to do in yoga in our own practice. We don't want to take Yogananda's word for it. We want to actually live through experience, which in itself would be quite an it would be a good use of this, wouldn't it? You say less and you do more, in a sense.
Yeah, definitely. I also feel like a lot of the great saints and sages knew how to use their language and their words, and they understood the power with that. And with that comes not speaking very often, because you're aware that if you're constantly speaking, you're constantly giving out, it's actually quite foolish and a great waste of one's energy if you are not using the correct words for what you mean.
That is a very interesting thought, that the less you speak, the more powerful your words might be. Absolutely. Chris?
Yeah, I love that idea, Lauren. I think it has been spoken by Yogananda in the past about this. I think maybe just to direct it a little bit is the truthfulness. Is the idea of speaking truth.
Yes.
That if you would only speak truth, you wouldn't dilute the power of your words, by telling, lies or anything like that, where
exactly
words would lose its power.
And stretching that thread to the end of the cord, I think Yogananda says once a week practice silence. So like one day the 7 don't speak.
Do any of you practice that?
I was just speaking to my wife about that, because we do that in the silent retreats. When we have silent retreats, we go and we do that, obviously, for SRF retreats, weekend retreats. And then, but I was just speaking to my wife the other day about that, because I said, why don't we just pick a day? And what did she say? she was up for it, but she kind of said, well, why don't we pick a day like when we're coming home from work, like, so then when we're finished, I'll say we only say what we need to. So like during the day, you obviously at work, so you say what you need to, but then when we get home that day, then we can say nothing. We can just, you know, carry on about our business. And I said, no, I'd rather do a complete full day where you're not talking at all, so a weekend day. And then she was like, but that's not going to be very feasible. And then we had this whole debate. So we're still having the debate about whether or not to actually implement it. Long story short.
It's funny, Frank, that you're bringing up your partner, your wife, because I'm just about to see him. And there's something to that, isn't there? Mahatma Gandhi was very famous for it, wasn't he? And when he met with Yogananda, I believe he was writing on a piece of paper to him to give him welcome him in writing, and that's a real commitment to it, isn't it? You know, somebody like Yogananda showing up in your door, an avatar, and still you're saying, you know, welcome on a piece of paper to him. I don't know how many people would commit to that practice given Yogananda's presence, but there's a lot of power to it. My wife and I don't know about anybody else, but I wake up wanting to continue the silence, and I would often maybe even be reduced to a whisper, and I'd be much more comfortable not breaking that silence in the morning. And maybe that's just a trait of many people in general, but it would cause a little bit of disruption because my wife is maybe a little bit more chatty than me in the mornings, and then I'm trying to, you know, stay silent to go into my meditations and carry that silence through and try to carry it on throughout the day. So I'm a little bit more chatty towards the later part of the day anyway, but certainly in the morning times, I would have to say I'm usually trying to continue my silence fast that I had during the night.
But you're blessed by being woken by a flurry of bird chatter, aren't you? So yeah, interrupting that bird song is almost like a blasphemy to talk about mundane things like good morning, how was your sleep? Same as pretty much every other day.
I wish it was as mundane as that. Have you not heard the chatter of parrots?
Oh yeah, that's not a good sound.
Sirens going off at 5 a.m. Yeah. But no, it is very nice to be able to wake up to the sound of nature, isn't it? You want to continue.
And there's something powerful about not saying anything for a while, not having a silent retreat. I remember last time I went to one, I then drove home afterwards, and I didn't want to listen to anything. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I just went home because it feels like the more you continue, the more it feels like you're building up power inside of you that you then can also feel in a meditation afterwards. But you really feel like if you start speaking, you are giving something up, right? So there is definitely a dynamic like that. Chris?
I think it's probably one of the more common concerns when people actually start with meditation. It's actually being able to sit in the silence. So somebody close to me was saying that, you know, their thoughts are too loud, essentially. You know, when they're silent, when they're not speaking, when they don't have some form of distraction in their life, actually just sitting with your own thoughts can become very loud and distracting in and of itself. So it is interesting. I think you're absolutely right. Like, it's a very powerful tool in meditation if you can use it in that way. But I think for the majority of us, like, the silence is actually, it's like a repulsive magnet. You know, it actually puts people off because they struggle to sit in that silence. They struggle to be in it. So I think that's exactly right. What you're saying, it's actually therefore a powerful tool if you can embrace it. Not for the faint-hearted.
If you can't be by yourself alone and silent, then you must be in bad company, I suppose.
That's what they say.
That's right. And so that silence helps you, like Chris just said, calm down your thoughts, right? Because you're not uttering them, so that means they become less prominent in your mind. And then something else happens that we're going to talk about now, because Guruji feels that Pranabananda was listening to his thoughts. He could read his thoughts. And there's a section in Divine Romance that I'm just going to read out quickly that talks about that a little bit. And it says, thoughts are so subtle that no instrument has been able to record them. This is why we have voices. They enable us to convey our thoughts. But if you advance spiritually and cultivate deep calmness within, you will be able to feel and read the thoughts of others. When you are disturbed or restless, your mind radio is so out of tune it cannot receive their mental messages. So what it hints towards is that you are silent and your mind becomes calm, and suddenly you start receiving everyone else on a deeper level, on a more subtle level. Guruji calls it a radio. And it's really, I feel, must be a much more pleasant way to communicate it, because you kind of get to be in the state of calm and still feel other people's thoughts. And this is kind of what probably happened in this case, because Swami Pranabananda kind of senses that Mukunda is becoming a bit anxious. He's sitting there. He goes like, what am I doing? This guy doesn't even know why I'm here. And nothing is happening. Am I just wasting my time here? But Swami Pranabananda kind of senses that and kind of reacts. And we will see even later that he is, while Pranabananda is sitting there, he is actually organizing what Guruji came here for, the meeting between him and one of Bhagavati's friends. So it's all in the making, but it's there's very little communication happening. Then
going to the reading of people's thoughts. So yeah. I think this is so he kind of like he didn't mention Kedarnath Babu to you before, and he said the person you wish to see will be here in half an hour. So that's the direct reading of the mind. But I was wondering about reading of the minds in general. Is that like a thing that people have got experience in? I don't have experience in it myself, a little bit actually, but I won't go into that. But I've had it very directly opposite me, in the opposite direction. When I was young, I used to like any holy person wearing ochre robes. I used to think, oh, they know, they're very powerful, so they can like, they can speak to me, they can bless me, they can, all these things. And I was in a hall when I was young. I was in a hall, and with like maybe 200-300 people, and the Swami at the front was giving a talk, and I didn't care much about what he was talking about, but I had my eyes closed, and I was kind of trying to commune with him and trying to get some sort of like blessing from him. And then at the end, kind of like, you kind of you touch, everyone lines up and you touch the Swami's feet and you depart. So I did that. And then 3 or 4 years later, my friend who belongs to that sect where the Swami is, in the Swaminarayan sect, took me to their temple in Neasden, and that was the same Swami. So he went and actually met the Swami, and he took me to his private office, and the Swami was like, oh, I've seen you before somewhere. Where have I seen you? And I was like, yeah, Swami, you have seen me. He's like, it was in that place, and he mentioned the date and the time, and I was like, oh my gosh, in front of like 300 people. And obviously I was trying to commune with him, but I didn't think that he would acknowledge that experience. But clearly it must have been etched in his brain through time. And there's not a small organization like that. So they have they have in the satsangs, they have like 2,000 people. So these aren't like small. They meet thousands of people every week.
Oh.
Yeah.
My wife and I call this our Bluetooth, and we often would say, "Hey, stop stealing my Bluetooth," or "Hey, like you're on my Bluetooth," because I suppose living with somebody, you're able to either preempt what somebody might think or say or do to some degree, and that's always a question of, are we preempting, or if we're trying to read somebody's mind, or we think that we're reading somebody's mind versus actually reading somebody's mind. The imagination versus reality might be different, but my wife and I seem to have this all the time, where seemingly random things that we either are doing, the other one has picked up on and mentions it without really knowing that the other one's doing it. So we have this so often that we call this our Bluetooth. We're picking up on each other's Bluetooth, which I think is quite fun. And I do strongly believe that you can train this element. And I wonder if this is just one of the many avenues that you could endlessly chase and be distracted with. Like what we're going to talk about in a later chapter, the perfume saint. You can manifest some form of divinity within yourself, and go about reading people's minds and shock and awe everybody. But it's just another facet of actually developing your spiritual journey, really.
The other examples I was didn't want to talk about was to do with my partner, my wife as well. But and you mentioned as well, which is cool. But I think with wives, and if you have a spiritually centered marriage, then you kind of both together develop this capability to read each other, and which comes to a very important point. Lying to your spiritual partner is, there's no point in doing it, because the truth will come out. So like the whole thing is like honesty and truth is just like it's just like a prerequisite if you're going to enter into that kind of relationship where you can read each other really easily. Yeah, just word of experienced warning.
Uh-oh. Clearly.
It doesn't even need to be like a lie that's like damaging. It could just be a lie about like chores or something like that, or like which way around did you do something, and then
Well, they
read.
say truthfulness is one of the pillars, right? So
yeah,
there you go, a lesson in there, I'm sure.
I remember many years ago at the London Center, I would always, like, the service would finish at 12, and then we would socialize a bit, and then oftentimes I would often want to go to lunch with some people. And I remember Priyank always, he had like a few fruits in his backpack that he had to eat before. And he still
does that now.
He was very strict about this. He was like, no, my wife gave me those fruits, I have to eat them. And
yep. And if I do not eat them, I'll give away, she'll somehow she'll know.
Wow.
Guilt is never the case, I think.
Yeah, perhaps. I don't know. I've got a fantastic poker face. In fact, well, last time that actually caused a real big argument. We played poker, Texas Hold'em, with plastic. I refused to play with money, so we're playing with the chips, and my wife was playing as well, and with my brother-in-law and some couple of friends, and yeah, and obviously I won, but she couldn't believe that she couldn't read my poker face. It was like really shocking. So we had like an argument later about, oh my god, if you're lying about this, what could I not tell about that you like? I was like, it's a game, relax. And then I realized poker is probably not a cool game for a spiritually inclined person.
Careful what you give energy to. I think the best example of this I have is actually my experience with Guruji. Not to bring it back to Guruji, but genuinely,
well done.
I don't know how many times I've been praying or thinking about something, asking for guidance or help, and then maybe it show up literally the next day in the lessons, or you would go into London Center and the sermon that day will be on the topic that you've been or these kind of things. And I think to myself, how much coincidence do you really need before you say, okay, well, you're communicating in a way, Guruji, he's reading your thoughts. He's there, in some form with you. And it's one of the most miraculous things really on the journey, that you develop this relationship through this subtlety. And over time you begin to kind of shed your doubts, because you have these experiences, right? It's affirmed over and over and over again. Yes, you're being listened to, and your thoughts are connected. You're connected with Guruji in that way. So that's, I mean, if anybody can relate to that, I think it seems quite common actually in the Strife path.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. There's two things I do like this. Like, one is like, I find my favorite book that I randomly open to get random wisdom is this one, where there's
light. Yeah.
And then there's one thing that friend of my sister's started, and like we keep doing it. Like, we have like a little jar with little cards in them. They're called angel cards, and each of them have like good quality in them. And every day you pick one up, and then it says strength, or it says eloquence, or it says something like that. And then you feel like this is your mission for the day, or this like. And with those, I also feel kind of, they always bring up exactly the quality that today is going to be needed. There seems to be some kind of in tuneness with that. Chris?
Yeah, it's funny you said that. There's a group on WhatsApp, SRF, and it's I think it kind of came about during COVID. It was something to do with health updates, and it's quite a big group. And I joined it, and there's messages every day, quotes from Guruji and the likes. And I wouldn't necessarily read it every day. I might say 2 or 3 days later, go back and maybe there's read 2 or 3. But often when I would go to read it, I would again have that experience like, oh, that's exactly, that's exactly what I would need in this moment. Like, this is the exact thing. So it is quite beautiful when you seem in sync with the world in that way. Your thoughts are being listened to by God in Guru.
Absolutely. Let's move on to the next thing that drew our attention, and that's he calls him Little Sir. He calls Mukunda Little Sir, and when you say it in, I believe it's Hindi, right? It's he says in the footnote, it's Choto Mahasaya, which sounds like a really great name. It sounds like a really reverent, like calling someone Choto Mahasaya, right? And maybe Little Sir doesn't really do it justice. I'm not the expert. Priyank commented on this, and he feels that it conveys more than just Little Sir would.
Yeah, it does. Chota Bhai is a common one, that young brother, young disciple. Little Sir is more the word you use, but Choto Mahasaya is the word Mahasaya means magnanimous, so the little magnanimous soul, that is Mukunda. And it's also probably got a link to Lahiri Mahasaya, who's his guru, so that could also mean that he's a little shining disciple of Lahiri Mahasaya, so Choto Mahasaya. Equally, if he said that many people, many saints used to call him this, which kind of means that they're acknowledging his divinity, but Guruji being very humble, that it means Little Sir, which obviously you could argue that it does, but the word Mahasaya means a lot more to us on this path than it does in just the translation of the word Hindi.
Very nice. Yeah, we see that often, that Guruji is very humble about himself, and he doesn't want to boast with the way he's being revered in India, or many other things that happened. And we talked about this in different contexts, like when he doesn't mention negative things that happened to him either. So this book is an amazing story, and still he's so humble about everything that happens. So he could probably right? For every story that he mentions, he could probably add 3 more or 5 more, right? And that would be very impressive. But he is very concise. I think the word is Pauciloquy.
Very precise.
Anyways, so what happens next is the kind of the miracle, right? So he sits there and then he says, "Oh yeah, by the way, your friend Kedarnath Babu, he's nearing the door, so he's here now." And then Guruji is like, "What? How did this happen? He didn't call anyone, he didn't send anyone to get him. He was just sitting there." And then he already hears someone coming up the stairs, and it is let's say Mukunda is quite confused by this. And the only way that it can happen is by him being, I think, what we would call telepathic, right? I mean, more than that, he's has 2 bodies. He does bilocation, but it's like the ultimate space annihilator, right? That he doesn't just, like, today this wouldn't be such a miracle. Today you would probably pick up your phone, write someone a text, right? And he would come by. But back then there weren't, this is not how this worked at all. I'm not even sure, I guess telephone was already a thing back then. But I'm not sure if how many people would actually have it, if it was more of a luxury or if it was something that everyone had. So it was definitely a complete miracle that happened here. And one thing that Guruji often talks about is the word space annihilation and time annihilation. He talks about that Dwapara Yuga brings a lot of space annihilators in. And there's also a nice section from the Bhagavad Gita that we can read out on this, where Guruji describes this a little bit. Lauren, would you mind reading that paragraph?
Love to. It says, time and space are categories and relativities of God's mind. A master, by his powerful thought, is able to annihilate time and space. Thought is the primary energy and vibration that emanated from God and is thus the creator of life, electrons, atoms, and all forms of energy. Thought itself is the finest vibratory energy, the speediest power among all powers. The vehicle of a great yogi's thought is powerful enough instantaneously to carry and cast a planet into the sun to be dissolved there, even as could God.
Wow. Yeah, so this is very impressive, but it's basically shows how easy this little miracle is for someone who is self-realized. Like we assume Swami Pranabananda is. For him, this is just a little trick. And in this case, he probably uses it to awaken a little bit the spiritual curiosity in young Mukunda. So he comes over and he basically wants to show him that, not that he's able to do it, but that this is possible. And so he first talks about his second pension, and then he follows it up by a real miracle that makes you think that a lot of things that he probably believed are not so, and a lot of things are just to be seen in a spiritual kind of context. And I find that this was probably a big moment in Guruji's young life where he got really awakened towards this kind of spiritual path, because this was something that was completely out of the ordinary. And then, of course, I think I would also awaken my own curiosity if something like that happened to me. And it's so subtle, right? It's not a miracle that happened for everyone to see. It's just for him, he did a little miracle, right? And I guess Kedarnath Babu was also a bit confused when he saw that. Yeah, and then Kedarnath Babu comes, and then they start talking to each other. And this is kind of where we end the chapter, but we still have this miracle of bilocation that actually happened. So Phil Goldberg writes in his biography that he mentions Swami Pranabananda, and he says Yogananda contended that one who awakens to the realization that all of creation is light becomes capable of miracles. A master is able to employ his divine knowledge of light phenomena to project instantly into perceptible manifestation the ubiquitous light atoms. And that's basically Guruji's scientific words of just how a master is able to move his own body to another place, or even have it be in two places at the same time. Chris?
This is the second saint that's able to display bilocation that Guruji's talked about already in the autobiography of a yogi, and the first one being Lahiri Mahasaya when he appeared to Bhagavati saying, Bhagavati, you're too harsh on your employee. So this is the second time, right? And it's obviously a lesson to me first reading the book, like, hey, this is something that's possible in if you follow meditation, somehow this is possible that these saints are able to do this. And Yogananda, as a young child, really reacted much differently to Bhagavati. And I think I said this at the time, Bhagavati reacted pretty stoically, in a sense, having someone manifest in front of him. And, he was able, maybe it was easier to believe his eyes because he actually saw it with his own. And then he rather loyally followed through with it, right? So he went to see Lahiri Mahasaya. But Yogananda as a young boy struggled with it a little bit more, as you said, Mike, earlier on. Like, how can you comprehend these things when you're too young? It's maybe going to be difficult to comprehend them. So we see two instances and two very different reactions, one being an adult and one being a child. So just to take us back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast, it's actually quite a good lesson in some ways, that you can't just spew knowledge indiscriminately around the world. It has to be given very specifically, because the reactions are going to be quite different.
Yeah, now it's true. Like, I mean, if you are Mukunda and you go on this trip, just see it more as a leisure trip, and you probably come back transformed from this, right? Because there's like some special things happen there. And Priyank, you added a few more details on the whole matter of bilocation. You want to drive this one?
Yes, please. So with my magnifying glass of the events and the time sequences. So Mukunda is having a conversation with Swami Pranabananda, and he's talking about pensions and fathomless peace, and then what happens is he says, later you'll understand the significance of a second pension, and then he says, abruptly terminating our conversation, the saint became gravely motionless. The sphinx-like air enveloped him. At first his eyes sparkled as if observing something of interest, and then growing dull. I felt abashed at his Pauciloquy. He had not yet told me how I might meet father's friend. A trifle restlessly, I looked about me in the bare room, empty except for us two. My idle gaze took in his wooden sandals lying under the platform seat. So, and then he kind of comes out for a little while and says, little sir, don't be worried. I'll find the man you're looking for, etc. So he read his mind. And then again, he fell into an inscrutable silence. So there's two phases of his silence. One was that initial one, which by the sounds of things wasn't that long, perhaps only 1 or 2 minutes. But the second one, again, he fell into an inscrutable silence. When my watch informed me that 30 minutes had elapsed, the Swami aroused himself, and then he tells him that Kedarnath Babu is coming to the door. So the 2 periods of silence where he kind of goes into this state of cosmic awareness, shall we call it, and cosmic manifestation. So the first is, I believe, that he's using a yoga technique, to locate this Kedarnath Babu. And if we fast forward a little bit, and we can actually find an example of this technique that Guruji himself uses later, and the people that know the autobiography very well may be reminded of the chapter Kashi Reborn and Rediscovered, and Discovered in chapter 28, where Guruji was looking for the boy Rama who passed away under his watch, and his disciple, and he wanted to discover where he had been reborn. And he described the technique that he used to actually physically locate him. And there's a bit of mystery around it, but perhaps, Chris, if you could read out that that technique that I've put in italics there, that he actually quotes in the autobiography.
How was I to tune in with him among so many vibrating lights of other souls? Using a secret yoga technique, I broadcasted my love to Kashi's soul through the microphone of the spiritual eye, the inner point between the eyebrows. Continue. Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
Number 1, the will, projected from the point between the eyebrows, is the broadcasting apparatus of thought, man's feeling of or emotional power, calmly concentrated on the heart, enables it to act as a mental radio that receives the messages of other persons far or near. In telepathy, the fine vibrations of thought in one man's mind are transmitted through the subtle vibrations of astral ether and then through the grosser earthly ether, creating electrical waves that in turn transform themselves.
So
Awesome.
This is how Guruji, this then perhaps you could just say that Swami Pranavananda used whilst in his period of first silence and stillness, and he mentioned like his eyes, at first his eyes sparkled, and then if you read Guruji's description of technique, he says, I broadcasted my love to Kashi's soul. So that might describe Swami Pranavananda's eyes sparkling perhaps, and because he's observing something of interest. So he's finally kind of located him, and then it says then it grew dull. So then he's actually using other techniques that Chris described there, i.e. the will and the apparatus of thought. So that's quite interesting. And then the second period of silence, where he says again, this is after he told or he reassured Mukunda that I'll locate your friend for you. But in my mind, he's actually just located him. So now he's actually going to physically locate him. So this is where the miracle actually occurs in this 30-minute period, which is obviously in the next episode, we're going to talk about that actual manifestation of Swami Pranavananda next to Kedarnath Babu, next to the river where he was bathing. So this 30 minutes, this was basically him, I think, bilocating, creating a second manifestation of himself, and then walking that physical body back, because he kind of like overtook Kedarnath Babu for some reason. We now know why, because he didn't want the confusion of two bodies, identical bodies, I suppose, in one space. So he might have, I reckon, what he probably would have done is just walked somewhere into some obscure corner and disintegrated that body and remerged with his actual body. Otherwise, things would get pretty crazy up in Varanasi. The Varanasi would not be ready for that.
I'm thinking of this Spider-Man meme, where they're pointing at each other. Do you guys know that one?
No. What happened?
You have like two identical Spider-Mans and they both point at each other.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, this is just speculation, but I think looking at the order of things, this looks like it is what happened.
This is such a good point, Priyank. I would love to have a camera follow his second body around and see what happens, if he actually disintegrates at some point, or what happens. Maybe he's on a completely different mission, does something else that day.
That goes to the Himalayas. I'll meet you back there, Lauren.
So, do you all think that it was a physical body that manifested? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I do. The reason for that is because the as Mike talked about, the wooden sandals. So Yogananda actually talked about the physical sandals that were there next to him. There's absolutely no reason, if you look at this whole tale, there's no reason to mention the wooden sandals. And then Kedarnath Babu then comes in and says, look, he was wearing those exact same wooden sandals. So he brings something material into the events that transpire, I think, for that particular reason, i.e. he manifested a physical. Because the other way, if the opposite was true and it was like a mental projection, so only Kedarnath Babu could see his form, then there'd be no need to mention and explicitly state these wooden sandals.
You say that though, but it makes it more real.
Yeah.
If
Why?
there is wooden sandals on his person, if he did mentally project this image of himself, because when Kedarnath Babu, is that how you pronounce the name?
Yeah.
When he comes back, it then makes that feel and know that that was really him. It links the two together.
He could have done that with clothes though.
But he probably was wearing the same clothes, no?
But he doesn't mention that, does he?
No, true.
He mentions only those sandals.
It's strange because when I have read it and when I read it, I always imagine that it's not a physical. It's not a this is a difficult one to think, but I always imagine it to be a projection that is not quite of this material plane of existence, but which does exist in that space at that time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like an energy, light projection.
And Gurji even talks about astrally created objects, right? That have less,
a bit like the amulet.
Expiration date, like the amulet, right?
Yeah.
So I don't even understand what the difference is. Like when Sri Yukteswar resurrects, he asks him, "Are you really? Is it really?" Because he holds him already in his hand, and he says,
fragrance.
"Still ask him, is it really you?"
And because he says like recreate an exact form, doesn't he?
Exactly. So it feels like that for me, rather.
Could be. It's not specific on this one here.
No, it leaves something to the imagination.
It does.
Yeah.
We weren't already sparked by this.
It's all secret.
It is.
Yeah. And some of the secrets will be revealed in the next episodes. And I think Priyan can give us a little teaser about that one.
Yes, we can. So we're going to delve into now the Kedarnath Babu's kind of explanation. Firstly, we're going to talk about the stupefaction of both Kedarnath Babu and Mukunda, who were both basically sharing stories, sharing their version of events that have miraculous events that have transpired. But then there's some pretty deep dialogue between Swami Pranavananda. Mostly he kind of like is challenging Mukunda, isn't he? Like, why are you stupefied by all this? So we're gonna dig into that. We're gonna kind of unravel the kind of narrative, the movie scene kind of narrative that's happening from like how this whole scene have looked from Kedarnath Babu's eyes, and what's his point of view of the whole scene, and what was his takeaway and learning from this, and what was Mukunda's, and what was Swami Pranavananda's. So yeah, lots of inspiration there, lots of mastery, and then there's also quite a big footnote that we can talk about as well.
Nice. Can't wait. I love all the miracles, and this is like a section of the autobiography where there's miracle upon miracle happening. So can't wait to get into this. And I think we've done justice to this part of the second part of chapter 3. And yeah, thank you all for listening and watching, and Jai Guru, everybody.
Jai Guru.
Thank you.
Bye.